Elayne Boosler.
Thank you so much. I hope you had a good time, and thank you so much for coming.
Yes.
Do they know about this?
I don't think they do.
You're not captive.
Yes, you are. Sure, no one can leave. Elayne, we do a podcast. I do a podcast. Since you're here, I made it we.
I'm captive. You're not captive.
We do a podcast on the web once a week, and Elayne agreed to do it. And so right now, we're live on the World Wide Web as of right now. So if you happen to be sitting with somebody you shouldn't be, maybe want to use the bathroom or something at this point in time you didn't know. So we're going to do a quick interview with Elayne, and we will allow you to ask some questions too. And also, I want to say again that don't go anywhere, because afterwards,
You can be here till Shavuos.
That's right. Elayne, all these people have been to my house. No, he has. Right over there. So you want to get these afterwards, because this goes to a great cause, and it's wonderful. So,
and they come with a little cute charm on them.
That's right.
And I sign them.
Usually, I start off by, because most of the comics that we're interviewing are touring road comics that are drug addicts, yes. And so the people don't really know anything about them, as opposed to you, and everybody knows everything.
Because I tell them during my show.
Exactly, and on the world, and on the internet, and on your biography.
Well, I make all that up. So.
Oh, do you? Well, I usually ask about family. It's in your biography that your mom and dad.
Okay, so next.
That. We don't get to talk about family? No? About brothers? I know you have no sisters.
I don't really talk about it.
Okay. Nothing about the brothers.
I told you I make it all up.
Okay. All right. And you went to, I usually talk about college, and all we know is that you went to USF for a very short time down here.
Well, actually, I didn't graduate high school, and my birthday was in the summer, so I was 16 when I got out, and my father said, when you're 18, you can drop dead, so he applied to a lot of, it was very good advice. He applied to a lot of schools, and USF accepted him, and I sat there until I turned 18, dropping acid and watching my hands at a house on the side of the road in Lutz, Florida, and then I left and became a waitress in New York, which was my dream.
And I like you had Lutz, Florida, because I always pronounced it wrong.
Is it Lutz?
Well, I've heard it Lutz.
Is it Lutz?
I don't know. Is it Lutz or Lutz?
Well, did that New York Jew buy it? Then it's Lutz. It's Lutz.
When you started in comedy, it was 1970.
I had started by leading Lewis and Clark across the. My stage name in those days was Sacagawea, but
It was like 77?
73.
73. 73. And so at that point.
Look, everyone's doing math.
Yeah. And at that point, what a lot of people don't realize is there weren't many comedy clubs at all. Comedy clubs started opening right around 1980, and that was when the boom started. So in your particular case, there were only a few places to even play or develop at all, and there weren't many female comedians other than the established stars, which were Joan Rivers and Toady Fields and Phyllis Diller.
And Lily Tomlin.
And that was it.
Pretty much, and Mom's Mabley from days before.
Exactly. And as you were developing...
I mean, there were great stand-ups before that. You used to see them on, the older shows. Rusty Warren, who actually was perceived as dirty, but was clean and wonderful. And Belle Barth was dirty.
So when you first knew you were famous... When was that?
I'm in a mall, sir. I'm in a mall next to the dollar store, but I'll let you know how it feels if it happens.
You're famous. You're famous.
I'm in a mall next to the dollar store. I saw it last night. The line was so long on the way in, and I said to my husband, "Wow, I really draw." And he said, "That's for the laundromat."
But somewhere in the late 70s or early 80s, it had to, I mean, there has to be a point where you're just out in public and you start to realize that you're really well known. That, I mean, is there a point, I mean, where it kind of blows you away?
I think it's all cumulative. I mean, for me, it was cumulative. Some people, you know, they get a TV show or a movie that's a hit, and then, wow, in one day. But, you know, for comedy, if you don't get a movie career or your own TV show, then it's really just like everybody else who goes to work every day and, you know, puts the tires on the car or whatever. I'm a working comic. It's, you know, you don't really know what it is because they don't do specials on that or talk about those people. It's just, we go to work every day. I'm the Willie Loman of comedy, you know. I go to the airport, I get on the plane, I do my show. I'm happy that I can do it. I love it. I mean, I love that these people came out on the most beautiful beach day ever to come in here and, you know, be in the dark. It's just so wonderful to me. And I mean, that's the reward, you know, but it's just cumulative. You just work, and when you're doing a lot of TV, a few more people wave to you in the street, and when you're doing less, a few less people wave to you in the street as you pass each other. That's all it is.
Okay. Well, the reason being is most people don't ever have that experience in their life.
Right. Well, I was walking with Shirley Hempel, who was a great comedian. Do you remember her from What's Happening?
Yes.
She was a very large African-American woman, one of the funniest, sweetest women in the world. We went to Chasen's in L.A. when she got famous, and she said, "Well, I'll have the chili." And they said, "Okay." And she looked at the menu, and chili was $60, and that was, you know, 30 years ago. She goes, "Chili, $60. Eat up, child. Must be a diamond in the bottom of this bowl." But I loved Shirley, and we'd always cross paths in New York, and I'd hook up with her for lunch, and I'd leave her because she could not walk down the street. It was first of all, she was very recognizable because she was large and had a very specific look, and I would, you know, have the patience for a half an hour with the autographs, and she would just talk to everyone forever, and I'd say, "I'm going to go eat. I'm going to fall down." But I mean, she could not walk down the street.
But that was not the case for you?
Oh, no, of course not. That was a hit television show. It's a very different thing. My thing was pretty much when at the height of my fame a while ago, people would just always wave in the street and say, "How you doing?" And I realized after seeing what Shirley went through and a lot of other friends, I was so happy that I got all the upside and none of the downside. The upside was, "Hey, we love it. Hey, it's great." And it wasn't enough where I had to, you know, not be able to live my life, because you do basically just your price is that you lose a lot of your time.
Right.
You know, but I like talking to people, and it was always kind of, "Hey, how you doing? Hey, where you going to be?" And, "Hey, you know," or whatever.
Because when I started in the early 80s, and I mean, we really consider, I want to say us as comedians, we really considered you to be not only the most dynamic female comedian out there, but the most beautiful.
Well, thank you. I'm also one of the top 5 male comedians in the country.
So in that, it's almost unbelievable that you didn't have that situation, which is great.
Well, that comes from that huge level of movie stardom or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a different thing. I did what people do who don't get movies. I gained 50 pounds and started rescuing cats.
So when the comedy boom happened, and that is clubs just started opening like crazy between 1980 and 85, you were already an established comedian, established celebrity. Did you play the club tour?
Every club. I was on the road 50 weeks a year for years.
So you did that whole thing. And from then to now, how have you seen it change?
Well, you know, it's a pendulum, just like politics. Everything swings back and forth. You have the silly stuff with an arrow through your head, and then you have people like George Carlin who get serious about politics, and then it goes back to the silly stuff like Andy Kaufman, and then back to the, you know, it just comes and goes, and it's never, you know, finite. And so, you know, you just wait it out if it's not a good period. But I think, you know, the main thing was maybe 1 billion years ago there were 10 great comics, and then 100 years ago there were 10 great comics, and then 30 years ago there were 10 great comics, and then 1,000 comics came in, and now there's 1 million comics and there are 10 great comics. So it's good and bad. It's open to everyone, and that's great. And if you're really good, you will rise up. But usually it's still always at the top is the people who love it for what it is, are not using it as a stepping stone to something else. Don't put MF, you know, in front of they don't use cursing as, you know, the end of the sentence. I mean, I'm very careful not to curse on stage. I have one punchline that's a curse, but...
That was a damn good one, too.
Thank you. But, and it's more dynamic because it's the only one in usually an hour and a half. But now that I've seen that so many comics, it's all just cursing, and I'm no prude. If you want to curse, make it funnier. I'll go anywhere with anyone. It can be black, bleak, filth, make it funny. But when you think that what Richard Pryor did was just say motherfucker, and that's all it was, then you don't know anything about comedy, because that's not what it was.
Right.
And he was a genius, but it was out of his environment that he wrote that way. When you come up and think that's what you have to do to be a comedian, you are insulting anybody who paid $1 to see you and wasting their time.
Absolutely.
And so I purposely won't. You know, there's one tool we have, and it's language. And if you don't know how to paint with language, then you know you're in the wrong job.
Right. You opened the door for female comics.
Not on purpose.
You did. You opened competition.
I know when they all walked in over my dead body.
Because literally, when HBO and Showtime all started putting specials on, they weren't putting any women in those specials.
Right.
And Elayne went ahead and got her own production company and produced her own special, and you sold it yourself. And
easier than it sounds.
Yeah, but you got
Harder
their
than
attention,
it
and it got everybody's attention, and it immediately opened the door.
Actually, was interesting. It was 85, and I was on the club circuit, and I was following all the guys who had their HBO specials around and around and around, and they were all moving up, and I couldn't move up because I was still on that circuit with nothing to break me through. And I kept meeting with Showtime and HBO. Those were the only games in town, begging. And they said, no one's going to watch a woman do an hour. And I said, I do 2 hours. I was doing 2.5-hour shows in those days. It was amazing. I have all the reviews that go, longest and best show. And I would follow all those guys into the clubs, and you know what the club owners would say? We're going to make our money back this week, thank goodness. So I kept trying to tell them. They said, no one wants to see a woman do an hour. So I had a boyfriend who was a filmmaker. I had a little bit of money, no credit cards, no bank account. We got everyone to do it on getting paid after it sold because they had no doubt that it would sell. And we did a really nice show. It was Party of One. It was a great show. I had, you know, he said, you better get some stars on the front end because they're not buying you. So Bill Cosby did it as a favor because he's always so aware of new young comics, and he liked me. Letterman stepped outside his show for the first time in 1985. Dr. Ruth was a huge star that year. Had great people. Tom Waits gave me his music. Couldn't sell the show. Went back in with the show. Great show. 12 years of honing that act. Went back in with a perfect show. No, no one wants to see a woman do an hour. Hey, how about we cut it in half and give you some money? I said, I'd rather die with it. So I went home and had a very expensive bar mitzvah film on my shelf for a year. And really, the best saying in TV is if someone in TV doesn't like you, wait 5 minutes. You know, they're all gone. I'm here. And after a year, better, younger, hipper, smarter people came in and said, this show is great. And that's what happened. And after it aired, and the New York Times raved about it, and Showtime bought it, HBO went and hired every woman they could find and called it Women of the Night. Of course, it still has to be hookers, right? Mm-hmm. And broke it into 4, so it was 15 minutes each woman because they still couldn't let them do more time. But it opened it. They all got seen. Absolutely. And we got Judy Tenuta and Wendy Liebman and Paula Poundstone. But they were working that whole time, too. Absolutely they were. And they were brilliant. And they're still on. If you ever see Paula Poundstone's name up anywhere, you want to go see her. Oh, she's been here. You want to go see her. Oh, my goodness. And Wendy Liebman and Judy. I mean, there's so many great people. And now that was 1986. Yeah, 86 is when it sold. And so here we are, you know, 20-some-odd years past that. I just want to tell them that we did send out hostage notes to your families, and when the money gets here... It won't get out. So you're 20-some-odd years past that, and just a thing happened just recently that popped up on the Facebook where there was statements made about female comedians
You know, and so, I mean, we're this far along, but still and yet, it's still there.
Les, how about yesterday's New York Times saying that race is still an issue in the presidential election? And there's no difference. I mean, they were saying in part of, was it Ohio? They were saying, you know, it's always, it was maybe not Ohio, but it was a state that always skews Democratic, always. And they were saying, not going to happen this time because race is still an issue. You know, it's like when people talk about eternal vigilance for things that happened in the past. Nothing's ever fixed. It's like tuning a guitar. It doesn't stay. And if you don't pay attention to it, it all slips back and goes away. You really have to live a conscious life and always try and be, you know, your best self to make sure that the good part of the world stays as the good part of the world. And we get sloppy and complacent. And look at women, you know, young women. I would go pitch after everything I did and accomplished, and I'd go to production companies and pitch to young women executives, and I'd say, well, I have this show about, and they say, excuse me, we're post-feminists here. And I'd say, well, should I slice up bananas and pour milk on you? I mean, I don't even know what that means, man. But, and so they've gotten complacent. And there are about 30 states where you cannot get an abortion if you need one, even if you're going to die, even if you were raped. I do a lot of work with WRRAP. Look them up online, rap.org. And we are basically the underground railroad of choice, getting you out, raising the money to get you out of states where you can get some help so your husband doesn't kill you. You know, I mean, it's all gone away. And really, if the Republicans get in again, and as I said, I don't like anybody, but their thing is they're much worse for people socially. And I think women are going to really wake up to a horrendous time in this country when they realize they're stuck, especially if they get raped or incest or anything. They're stuck.
You're so
annoying.
No, passionately political and active. Have you ever thought of moving into politics?
Not at all, no, because I don't play well with others. Most comedians don't.
Neither do they.
Well, but you know what? It's like being in movies. It takes, every time there's a hit movie, you read the guy's bio who did it, and he said, it took me 18 years to get this film made, and I think, I'm so glad I'm not in movies. Every night I get to come out and do what I do. Every night I get to, like, deliver a movie, you know, and it's wonderful. And politics, it's a billion years to get something. Do you know the ERA was first put up, I think it was 1928? And it's like a couple of words. It just says, you know, the Congress cannot make a law abridging rights based on sex. How hard is that? And if men were not, you know, the great thing that the Republicans can do is to get people to vote against their own interests. If men were not brainwashed by, you know, against the ERA at the time it was out in this country in the 80s, they would now not be stuck for child support, begging for visitation with their kids. It would have protected men exactly as much as women. It wouldn't have been automatic, the mother gets custody and you pay. It was equal rights amendment. It was just as good for men. Everybody had to pay, shared custody, whatever you wanted. It wasn't automatic that you were screwed on a divorce. They didn't want to pass it, now they're screwed. I mean, people have to stop listening to Democrats who stink as well, Republicans who stink as well, and get your own information and be logical. Don't let people fire you up. I used to be so knee-jerk, and now I go, really? Well, if that happened, that would be awful. I'm going to go find out if that really happened. And that's what you have to do.
Hear, hear for the Congress lady from the great state of New York. Be great. Quickly, does anyone have a question for Elayne?
Let us out! Let us out!
Yes. Did you write for it?
The first show I got hired to write on was Rodney Dangerfield's first special, which was It's Not Easy Being Me, and won a ton of Emmys. That was great. And I'll tell you a great story. I was really young, and I got hired to write, and Harold Ramis was one of the writers, and Stanley Myron Handelman, who was a genius comic. Do you remember him at all? He was a wonderful, very, very Jewish comic. He used to wear a little cap, and then he'd say, I'm going to do an impression. And he'd talk like that. And then he'd turn around, take off his cap, mess up his hair, put his cap back on, and turn back around, so no difference. And then he'd do his, but he was so funny, and he'd say things like, I had a very long accident this afternoon. I fell down the up escalator at Macy's. He was just sublime, you know. So we're writing for Rodney, but we're out in LA writing, and in the last week of production, Rodney Dangerfield flies to California, takes this huge mansion in Malibu, and we all leave the office and go to see him at the house. I walk into this $1,000,000 house. You know, it's so beautiful. The ocean is coming right up to the glass wall in the living room where Rodney is sitting on a couch in his usual bathrobe with his underpants on, his legs spread, his belly hanging over, his underpants hanging, eating a bowl of cereal on the coffee table that's dripping down onto the coffee table. And I'm so young and in awe of this house. I say, oh, and I knew Rodney very well from New York before that. I say, oh, Rodney, this house must be costing you a fortune. And without looking at me, he says, you kidding? 18 cents a wave. He's one of the funniest men on earth and the kindest to all new young comics and the nicest. He is great. Yeah. So.
Hi, I'm born and raised in Windsor. I'm a Canadian.
Oh, my husband's Canadian. Saskatoon.
Okay. And I live in Kitchener, but I'm here and I'm very thankful to be here because my health is like 85% better.
Wow, I thought Canada had the free stuff.
No, we all pay taxes.
No, but I mean, isn't Canada good health care? You're talking about the climate? Ah, good.
Yes.
And the brisket.
Oh yeah, 13% tax. Anyways, never mind that. I just commend you for complimenting your Canadian venue in this little itinerary here.
Did I compliment a Canadian venue?
Yes, you said credits include the most respected shows, stars, and venues in the English-speaking world, and a few in the Canadian-speaking world.
How nice.
I made that up.
You are. You're pretty funny.
I could have
But
sworn you'd been to Canada a couple
I
of
have
times.
a million times.
For cigarettes or something.
I did the Des O'Connor show a zillion times, probably before you were born. I used to, and the Tommy Moore. I used to be there all the time. So. Oh, hey. Settle down, little lady. I was born in 52. So. But I mean, I traveled there a zillion times. The coldest I ever was in my entire life was in Calgary. I had 2 weeks in Calgary, and I kid you not, I, in those days, carried a little tape recorder, just a little tape recorder that ran on battery so I could tape my show and work on material. But I'd carry music cassettes as well. And I was in Calgary. It was 40, I learned that Fahrenheit and Celsius cross at 40 below when I was in Calgary. I put a Johnny Mathis cassette in my tape recorder, and I saw his breath coming out of the speakers. It was the coldest.
No.
In the middle of summer, that doesn't work.
But it's beautiful.
But I have to tell you that I had a cerebral palsy brother, and he used to watch The Tonight Show, and he was quadriplegic. Everybody thought he was mental, but he wasn't. And he saw you on that show.
Well, that doesn't prove anything.
You're awesome.
Thanks.
And I'm here because of St. Armand's Key Lutheran Church. Annalee said, come and go see.
Church? Yeah, I am the don't be. Church would come to see me?
They're talking you
I'm
up.
the warning. I'm the
Talking you
warning.
up at the church.
Well, thank you. That's so nice.
Glenn used to just love that show.
That's great.
Thank you.
Wow, thanks.
Another question?
Any synagogues bother to schlep out
Yes.
to see me tonight? No, no. It was
Hi,
a-
Elayne. It's me, Jordan.
Hi, Jordan. Margulis? Is your last name Margulis? Because I have a Jordan Margulis on Facebook. Tell me your last name. Hi, it is. I do know my Facebook peeps.
Wow.
How are you?
I wanted to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
How long did you want to do this? When did you start?
Oh, I didn't want to do this. What little girl, watches Milton Berle on The Tonight Show and says, oh, that? Are you crazy?
Like a class clown?
No, I needed to get out of that hellhole, and I had no skills, and I got fired from all the A's, all the B's. I got up to C, made it all the way down to comedy, didn't get fired, boom, that was it. I just wanted to pay rent. I had no skills, no talents, no nothing. This was a fluke. I was singing as a waitress in a club, and Andy Kaufman was one of the comedians in the club, and he saw me sing, and he said, you really should never do that again. And I said, what am I going to do? He said, you're so funny. I said, well, what is that job? He said, comedy. I said, what's that? I mean, these guys would go up and do comedy. I thought, what are they talking to? I didn't even know what it was. And Andy was, if it wasn't for Andy Kaufman, we lived together for 2.5 years and remained friends for the rest of his life. If it wasn't for Andy, I would never. I mean, he just made me stay in it and do this. And I actually never wrote a book, and I am writing a book this year. It'll be out at the end of the year. It's not an autobiography. Aren't you happy to hear that? No whining, no blaming, nothing about childhood. It starts in 1973 when I walk into the club and see Kaufman, and it's all the funny stories of starting out with Richard Lewis and Andy Kaufman and Larry David and Freddie Prinze and Jimmy Walker and Shirley Hempel and David Letterman and Jay Leno. It's all the funny stories of what we went through to try and learn how to be comedians. No childhood, nothing like that, and it's called Big Fun, and it'll be out at the end of the year, so it'll make you laugh.
Elayne Boosler, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Elayne.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.